you, Dr. Moya. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Jessica Ayala. I'm the project coordinator of Cuidate. We are very thankful that you guys are here with us today. And it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker, which is Danielle G Garza. He's a patient leader for over 20 years. He speaks publicly about HIV diagnosed in September of 2000, anal cancer in May 2015, and ostomy in April 2016. Danielle shares his story on social media through several campaigns such as Possibly Fearless, volunteers for organizations such as Radiant Health Centers, and works with Wego Health and NMAC as a consultant. Through his company, Little Mexican Productions, Inc., Danielle and his partner Christian produces live stream content that is geared towards adding positive messages to HIV, cancer, and LGBTQ plus communities. So it's an honor to present Danielle G Garza. Take it away.
Buenos días, ¿cómo amanecieron? Good morning. Para que no tenga su cafecito, good morning. I'm in Laguna Beach, California, so es bien temprano todavía aquí. I'm not sure if I'm even awake yet, so good morning. Can everybody hear me okay, first of all? Gotten used to that. Even when I'm in person with people and I'm like, can you hear me okay? Let me start by introducing myself. It's always interesting when people read your bio and you realize like, yo hago todo eso. Do I really do all that? How do I fit everything? But yes, I'm Danielle G Garza. Oh, it's telling me that I have a meeting. Yes, I'm already in the meeting, Alexa. Thank you so much. The Alexa's reminding me that I have this meeting right now. And right there. But so yes, Danielle G Garza. I'm originally from Monterrey, Mexico, so regiomontano, norteño. I grew up in Dallas, so I always consider myself an original Tex-Mex because my dad's Texan and my mom's Mexican. So put a Tex-Mex. I lived in Houston. I lived in the Texas Valley. And now I live in Laguna Beach, California. I've been here for about 13 years. And I want to tell you my really quick story, nothing to do with my advocacy. But the very first time I went to El Paso was through a sister program on HIV education and prevention. And my colleague he passed away several years ago, but he was from El Paso. So we landed, and as we're landing and pick up the rental car, he's like, te voy a llevar to the best place in El Paso. And I was like, órale, vámonos. And he knew I've always loved tacos. He's like, te voy a los tacos más ricos del Paso. And I'm like, órale, like, where are we going? So we pull up to this little place and I'm like, are you sure this is the place? Well, he took me to Chico's Tacos. Chico's Tacos was my very first thing that I ever ate in El Paso. And I fell in love with it. Something about that sauce and the fries. So every time I fly to El Paso, I always have to make a stop at Chico's Tacos. I know there's a controversy between are they good or not, but I like them. So that anyway, that's my connection to El Paso. Part of who I am, I'm an actor. I'm a stand-up comic. I produce, direct, and host my live stream shows with my partner Christian. And yes, it's called Little Mexican Productions Inc. Porque tú chiquito, so it's called Little Mexican Productions. I'm also an advocate in HIV. Cancer, and I've usually started taking on more a front row or front seat in ostomies, especially in Latinos, because we don't really talk about that either. I'm also a Reiki master. I'm a spiritual life coach. On the side, I do card readings, para el que quiera, echo la baraja. And I'm also an author of a children's book during the lockdown because I didn't have anything else to do. So I do a lot of different things. IMC. I'm very active, and this is going to fall into place later as my story progresses. But I like to be very active in the community, and I like to do as much as I can. I was supposed to set my timer so that I knew how long to talk. Ando nervioso, no sé por qué. Maybe it's because like it's mi gente, and it's always cool when you get a chance to speak in the way that you feel comfortable. Usually it's only English or Spanish. Y aquí me voy a aventar los dos a ver qué sale. So let me start from the beginning. So back in September of 2000, I was diagnosed with AIDS. I was living in Houston. I was 29 years old. Knew what was going on because I was a 29-year-old gay man and I knew about HIV and I knew what was happening in the community. But I was selectively ignorant. No quería saber. Y sabes cómo somos a veces. Si no se habla en la mesa, no cuenta. And I didn't talk about HIV and AIDS. So it didn't really, I feel like it didn't matter to me until I got very sick and ended up in the hospital. My family found out My mom, my dad, and my sister were in the room with me because the doctor walked in and said, I have your results, and excuse your family. And I was like, no, hombre, no, si se lo sabe Dios, que lo sepa el mundo, like tell everybody. So my parents found out with me that I had AIDS. Very traumatic. My dad didn't really understand, but because we had a really weird relationship, he left the room. My mom no entendía. She never really understood English. She passed away in 2020, and my sister, who's bilingual, knew what AIDS was, and so she's trying to explain to my mom que es SIDA, que es SIDA, and my mom couldn't quite comprehend what SIDA was either. She knew, but she didn't know until my sister blurted out, "It's like es eso que le da los jotos," and my mom got it, and that was the beginning of my traumatic adventure in HIV and AIDS, which I ended up turning into something positive, and I'll explain. After I left the hospital, I was too sick to live in Houston. I was 115 pounds at that point, and very sick. So they moved me from Houston down to McAllen. And immediately they put me in the maid's room, el cuarto de escondido. So my nephews were told that esos son los platos de tío, that's his cup, that's his towel, don't touch it. I ended up having to go to the CDC Center in San Antonio to get treated because I also had TB. So there was a lot of fears and a lot of scares. When I came back to the Valley, I ended up volunteering at the Valley AIDS Council. And that's where I started to learn what HIV really was and what AIDS really was. Y ahí es donde empezó my life as an advocate. I started to learn for myself so I could teach my family. So this is where my story begins. Now, one of the frustrating things as we talk about cancer was that I started doing education and prevention classes almost the beginning. I wasn't even a year diagnosed. And because in the Valley, ustedes saben, not everybody wants to talk about very personal and serious things. So being in el Valle de Texas, there wasn't a lot of Latinos who wanted to talk about HIV and AIDS. Pero yo como soy bien hablador y no me callo, I was like, we need a volunteer, pues yo voy. And we need somebody on TV, pues yo lo hago. And so eventually, small towns, todo mundo sabía lo que estaba pasando. So I became kind of like a little poster child for HIV and AIDS in the Latin community in South Texas, which I became very proud of. But ahí es donde empezó a educar mi familia. That's how I started educating my family. It took me 14 years to learn that there are about 25 different cancers that affect HIV positive people at a 35% higher rate. Yo no sabía, I didn't know. And it was very frustrating when, now we come to cancer, when in 2015, y para que sepan qué tan mexicano soy, I was diagnosed on Cinco de Mayo. So actually tomorrow is my anniversary of my diagnosis. So tomorrow's going to be que 7 años ya. So yesterday, 7 years ago, was the first time that I'm trying to start a hashtag let's talk about butt stuff, because we don't talk about it enough. And I'm going to get it going. Eventually it's going to get going. When you hear it somewhere, you'll be like, I know where that started. But on May 15th, on May 5th, 2015, me and my partner Christian were getting ready to go to a Cinco de Mayo party and just go celebrate. But I had been having trouble going to the bathroom for a while. So this is May. Since November, I had been having issues. Talking to my doctor about it, like I can't, I'm having trouble going to the bathroom. There's blood. Like, what am I do? So unfortunately, and this is something that I've learned more in the last 7 years. Unfortunately, for a lot of Latino men, we're not very good about going to the doctor. El machismo, la cultura, the fact that a doctor is going to put his fingers where? No, yo no voy con el doctor. ¿Cómo voy con el doctor a que me hagan eso? So as a Latino man, even though I have been gay all my life, I still had issues about going to the doctor and getting treated. Even though I was raised in the States and knew that doctors could help me, la cultura no te sale, right? It still sticks in your head. So the doctor kept telling me, well, it's your culture, it's your nutrition, it's your work ethic. It's because I did a lot of running around for my job. It's like, that's why you're bleeding. That's why you're having problems. Like, watch your food, watch your cholesterol, and it'll get better. I was like, okay. And then other times he would tell me, well, because you're gay is that you're bleeding and you're having issues and you're having problems. Sex, your partner's positions, like all these things were attributed to why I was bleeding and having issues. Yo me las creía, like, okay, that makes sense. Like that makes perfect sense. Until finally I had a hernia surgery at the beginning of 2015. Is everybody okay so far? Everybody following me? I get a little lost. Si se pierden, levante la mano and I'll find you and bring you back. But at the beginning of 2015, I had a hernia and I had a strangulated intestine. And we thought, ya encontramos, we found the problem. So I went into the doctor on Wednesday. He called the specialist. I was at the specialist on Thursday. Friday, I was in surgery because they were like, you're about to go septic if we don't take care of this. I didn't know that was a thing. 6 weeks of recoup time, I go back in to get checked. I'm still having issues. I'm still having problems. And they assumed that it was the pain pills that were giving me issues, that's why I was constipated. I wasn't taking the pain pills because I was taking other pain pills for my arthritis. So they finally say, well, we're going to do a little check. So they do the probe. And the specialist says, I can feel the mass. So they send me back to my primary doctor, who now believes that there's something there. So after, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, after 7 months of telling him there's something wrong down there, he finally does the probe and he's like, oh yeah, I can feel the mass. And I kept thinking, why didn't we do this 7 months ago? If that mass is there now, it must have been there 7 months ago. And we could have taken care of this 7 months ago. So they sent me to the oncologist, does the same test. And I thought, que tan sencillo, how easy. They didn't have to hook me up to a machine. We didn't have to make an extra appointment. Pero yo también de terco. All he had to do was put his fingers up there and figure it out. Yeah, that was like the initial diagnosis could have been resolved. So that's why I tell people, like, let's talk about butt stuff. Because all it takes is a couple of minutes and just be uncomfortable for a couple of minutes. And if they find something, we can get there faster. Because there's a lot of things for colorectal cancer. We talk about colorectal cancer all the time. And if you go to any conferences or summits, everybody's ready to talk about them, but nobody wants to talk about anal cancer, mainly because we don't want to talk about it. So that's probably one of the reasons that I'm here today. It's like I want you to hear it. Everybody good? Everybody good so far? Okay. So my oncologist finally says, well, let's do diagnosis. First we had to do the colonoscopy. If you know, you know. If you've been through them, you know. Primero te dan ese jugo del diablo, and then you go in for the colonoscopy. If you haven't had one, you don't know. But los que saben, just shake your hand. So solidarity. So I go get that done, and it's about 2 weeks to get your results. But I was really having a lot of problems. I was down to jellos and soups and casi no comía, but I was still getting bloated and I was still having trouble. So that's why Cinco de Mayo that year, and I remember it because it was a Tuesday. So I was double excited because it was Taco Tuesday and Cinco de Mayo all in one. And we had this big party we were going to go to. I was going to make tacos, and I make really good guacamole. So we're going to make guacamole. But that morning I woke up and I was just having pain and it was hurting, and everything from my stomach down was in pain. So Christian says, call doctor. His name's Dr. Rad. And he's like, call Dr. Rad and tell him what's going on. So we did. And he's like, if you can get here in the next hour, I can see you because I have surgery. Pues, vuélale. We got there and sat me down, and all he had to do was look at me. All he had to do was look at me. And if you've been through cancer, or if you've been with somebody who's been through cancer, is there something in the look, la mirada, and you just know. And he didn't even have to say it, but he was like, it's anal cancer. And I'd never heard of anal cancer. I didn't even know it was a thing. So no soy muy llorón, but I might cry today because I'm remembering all this stuff right now. But I started crying a little bit. And one of the coolest things that this doctor did that no doctor had ever done is he got up from his chair, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, look at me. And I was like, no, I'm fine. He's like, look at me. And I was like, I'm good, doctor, I'm doing it. And he's like, look at me. So I looked at him, And he said, "We got this." My first thought, because I'm sarcastic, I was like, "We? Why we? It's my butt. Why we?" But then it like the words sunk in. I knew what he meant. Like he was not going to leave me alone. He was right there with me, and he was. From that moment on, I trusted him wholeheartedly. Like whatever he suggested, whatever he said, we ended up doing the little pump. So I had the portacath. It still took about a month to get into like the treatment stuff, but we did the little pump. If you're familiar with the little pumps, it's una bombita, and you carry it in a little fanny pack for a week, and they cook it up, and you feel like an alien because things are just flowing. Pero yo me quedé bien fregón. I was like, yo soy Garza de Monterrey. A mí no me afecta estas cosas. Well, that lasted like 2 days because then that chemo started kicking in and it was not pretty. I went through everything, the smells, the taste. I hated everybody. I started going through the 5 stages of grief because I wholeheartedly believe that you lose a part of yourself when you're going through cancer. There's a part of you that dies. I don't know if it's faith or hope or believing in that everything's going to be okay, or hurting because I'd already been through AIDS, and you start talking to God, because I do come from a Catholic family and I do believe in my God. And you go through those moments like, Diosito, like, haven't I done enough for you already? Like, come on, man, like spread it around, que otros gocen del dolor. The only thing that I lost, for those of you that know about cancer, the only thing that I lost the flavor for were oranges. Te dicen, don't eat your favorite foods during chemo because the taste is very metallic and you lose the taste for it. And to this day, I can't eat oranges. They always taste metallic. So les echo mucho chile. Eva was talking about chile. Yo en la mañana con la naranja con el chile. But okay, so moving on. Everybody good so far? Everybody good? All right, cool. If I get boring, just tell me. I tend to wander off sometimes. So I started doing research after cancer, and that's when I realized about all these other cancers that come with HIV. I also had HPV, and I never knew. I didn't know. I'm 51 years old. I should have said that at the beginning. I'm 51. And I know you're looking at me going, qué guapo. I know. For 51, I'm very good looking. And, pues no le digo yo, ¿quién lo dice? And I was very frustrated. I was mad at God. I was mad at the doctors. I was mad at myself because I thought, after 14 years of teaching about HIV, how did I not know about this? How did I not know? And then I started asking some of my fellow HIV advocates, and muchos no sabían. We didn't know. And I'm like, where is the root of this problem? Who's keeping this information, and why are we not talking about it? And then I realized that doctors just don't talk. And a lot of my friends were getting diagnosed the same way that I was. I started finding friends who were also diagnosed with anal cancer, and the doctors weren't talking about it either, especially if they were gay. It's like, oh, you're just having rough sex. That's why you're hurting, or just use more lube, or get a better diet. But we weren't talking about the actual thing. So my treatment, I started about my treatment. 40 rounds of radiation, which we ended up leaving 2 out. So we did 38, which was a lot because they overlapped with my chemo. So I was doing a week of chemo, radiation, and then the last week of chemo radiation. Oh, para acabarla, my last day of chemo was 4th of July. Para que se la apunten. That's how Mexican-American I am. Empecé el 5 de mayo and I ended 4th of July. So this year, when you're celebrating and throwing fireworks and comiendo hot dogs, you're going to think about me. You're welcome. You're welcome on that one. One of the things that frustrated about treatment, not necessarily the treatment, it was the lack of information that was given to me before, during, and after. Like, they don't tell you as a man that they're going to be putting this radiation machine right on your crotch, that it's going to affect erection, it's going to affect your sex life. As a Latino macho, it's going to affect the way you think. It really does mess with your head. There is this connection. I mean, we're men. There's a connection between our brains and our penises. We try to deny it all we want, but there is. And the moment that that's affected, you don't know how connected you are until you can't use it anymore. And they didn't tell us how that was going to affect my relationship with my partner. Because when I was diagnosed, we were 2 years in our relationship, 3 years. And for the next year and a half, from the start of my hernia surgery till the end of recouping from my ostomy surgery, it was a year and a half. He was my primary caregiver. So that affected a year and a half. They didn't tell us about how he would become a caregiver and he would have that role for not a year and a half. Because many people think, pues ya se acabó. Yeah, he's my boyfriend again. But it's taken us like 5 years after my diagnosis for him to get back into the role of my partner. Anytime that I hurt, anytime something would happen, I had some other emergencies that I had to go. His caregiver hat is still on, so he worries like a caregiver. It messed up our relationship. We're both going to therapy. We'll be celebrating 10 years on the 9th, by the way. But it really affected the relationship. Nobody talked about that. There was never a moment where somebody said, hey, you're about to start treatment. Let's talk about everything that can happen. Nunca nos dijeron nada. So we had to learn about all these things. Then the complications happened. So there were a lot of fistulas and tears that happened because of the radiation, which the cancer was sitting right on the sphincter. So we were very fortunate that radiation and chemo took care of the tumor, the cancer, pero con eso se llevó la mitad del sphincter. So half the sphincter was gone. So I had to use diapers for a while. And I'm not going to lie, I like the way my jeans looked when I wear diapers because they give me a little booty. But you can't do that forever. And for somebody who's as active as I am, donde quiera ando, and I love to travel, and my work allows me to go to different places. It's just not convenient when you're flying to be wearing diapers. And aparte que para decirles, esas camitas no te aguantan. No, just kidding, I never did that. I can see y'all imagining me like laying on one of the little beds getting changed now. But a lot of these things were things that nobody was talking to me about. I ended up in the emergency room one day because the fistula was right in front of an artery and the artery burst. And for those of you know about hemoglobin counts, I didn't know about that either until I got sick. I went from 13 to 5, so I ended up in the emergency room. Technically, para que sepan, I've technically died 5 times in my life and been brought back. So I have 4 more. I'm thinking I'm a cat. That I think my spirit animal is a cat. Me faltan 4 todavía. But these are things that people just didn't talk to us about, and it got really frustrating. And we got mad. We got mad. Christian and I were mad that doctors were not talking about this. And when we would ask, why are you not talking? A lot of the answers were like, because nobody's asking. And I was like, oh, that's dumb. But then I realized, well, we don't know what to ask about. Like, there is no education out there. ¿Cómo voy a saber yo como Latino? And raise your hand if you're like me. Like, we moved here when I was 3. I've been in this country since I was 3 years old. Like, I'm very Americanized, but I still live under the culture, la mexicana. My mom would say, because how many of you translate for your parents when you were kids? I knew about vagina things when I was 6 years old. Like, there are things that you should not talk about your mother. Pero también aprendí de mi mamá, no digas eso. Don't talk about that. Don't say it. And so we wouldn't talk about it. And then I realized, as a gay man, as a Latino man, there are certain things that because of my culture, I didn't talk about because of social norms. Eso no se discute, no, ¿cómo vas a hablar con eso con la gente? We're not going to go talk. And you're like, but it's the doctor. The doctor needs to know that there's a pain. No, what is this? And then somehow religion always played into it. Diosito me ayuda, Diosito me va a ayudar. ¿Para qué es con el doctor? Si Dios quiere que me muera, me muero. And for some reason, when I was going through cancer, that was very real for me. I was like, I didn't want to go to treatment anymore. I was tired. There was a moment when I was 123 pounds in a wheelchair and I couldn't walk and I couldn't eat anything. And I was wearing a diaper. And so I'm going to tell you this one night. There was one night, the fistula was open and I was wearing diapers and chemo changes the way you eat too. There's things that I just can't eat anymore. Like I became lactose intolerant and I became, I can't digest pork well. And so carnitas con queso was out of the picture after that. But there was one night that we still couldn't figure out what foods were hurting my stomach. And I'd showered like 6 times that day because it got messy, and you're tired and your brain is all full of like chemo and fog. And let me tell you, that chemo brain is so real. And I was ready to go to bed that night. It was probably about midnight. And Christian, his code word for me when I smelled was like, babe, you need a shower. And because I would get really hurt when he said, you need to change your diaper, or like, and I got out of the shower and I was tired. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be representing anybody. I don't want to do any more videos about cancer. And I was crying, pero no esas lloraditas, esas lloradas de novela, like moco and everything. And I told him, and I was so serious. I'm like, I'm going to write a note and I'm going to tell them that I asked you to kill me, and just put a pillow over my head. And I'll make a video and I'll tell them that I told you it was okay. And he was like, and I was at his house and he lives across the police station. I'm like, I'll go tell them right now that I told you to kill me. And he was like, babe, it doesn't work that way. I'm like, I don't want to be here. But I didn't want to be here anymore. I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I thought, I survived AIDS and I've done my work. And when I was diagnosed with, the day I was diagnosed with cancer, we were driving back home from the doctor. We didn't go to the party that day. We were driving back home and I'm texting my sisters. One lives in the Valley, one lives in Monterrey, and I'm texting them both. And I'm like, I need to talk to you. And without even skipping a beat, I didn't even turn to Christian. I go, I'm going to make a video when I get home. And he just like, of course you are. So there's a 30-day video diary of my cancer journey on YouTube if you want to check it out. I was tired. I was so tired. And I thought, si yo que sé, and I have a support system, and I have people that love me, and mind you, I was still doing presentations. I was still traveling to schools to do presentations during treatment. I was 123 pounds. They would pull me up to the school, wheel me into the classroom. I would teach, and then I would leave. So I was still working. I was still doing card readings on Zoom before Zoom was popular. I was still working. Pero ese día, that day, after the 7th shower and the 7th diaper, I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And luckily, I have a really cool partner. He just gave me a pain pill, helped me change, put me in bed, crying still. And I woke up the next morning. I'm like, okay, as I was saying, yo que sé, I have a support system. I know I can research, I can talk, I can go to the doctor. I don't have the fear of being undocumented. I don't have the fear that they can't understand me. I don't have the fear that nobody is around me. Tengo todo. What about the people that don't have any of that? What about them? And I'm sure all of you as advocates, every once in a while, we do have that God complex, and we put on our Superman cape and we want to save the world, and we will do anything. And I thought, in that moment, I thought, somebody needs to talk about anal cancer. And if nobody is going to talk about it, I will do it. And my jokes, because I'm a comedian, my jokes like, I will make an ass of myself if nobody else is going to do it. I will do it. And that's really where the journey started. And it took me a little while to really get into it. I didn't really know how to get into cancer or conversations, or I still was doing HIV for a long time. Fortunately, I ended up as a guest at the Advancing the Science of Cancer Latinos conference. And man, that changed my life. I got there, and everybody okay so far, by the way? And we're going to have some Q&A, so please gear up your questions. And I don't edit. Lo que quieran preguntar, ya saben. So I showed up at the conference, and that first morning checking in, I have my little badge that says speaker, and I'm walking around all the vendors. And I realized that as I was asking, I was like, what are y'all talking about? Who are you? What are you doing? Everybody was talking about breast cancer, colorectal cancer, ovarian cancers, leukemia. And I was like, and they were like, what are you speaking about? I said, anal cancer. And everybody, there must have been about 20 vendors. Ni uno, not one of them had anything about anal cancer. So I started making a joke about it. And I would go up to them and I would walk around again. I'm like, so what are you talking about? And they're like, breast cancer. I'm like, ooh, second base cancers. And they were like, oh yeah. And then I would walk around, what are you talking about? I was like, colorectal cancer. Like, ooh, third base cancer. So you go, boys. And they were like, what are you, leukemia? Ooh, all the way. And then they would ask me again, what are you talking about? I'm like, talking about butt stuff. Se quedaban con las hojas, like, what? So I will share my video. There's a video of the presentation. They didn't record it. I recorded it, but I do talk about butt stuff. So when people were in line after I finished talking, and one of the things that I didn't know, and I'm glad I didn't know until after I spoke, was that these were all like scientists and doctors and researchers, like really smart people. Que yo no tengo nada, estoy bien bruto. But they was really smart people. And I'm glad I didn't know because it allowed me the freedom to speak the way that I wanted to and share the story the way that it affected me as a Latino gay man who has had anal cancer, who comes from a conservative religious family, who carries the social norms and really lives the culture. Even though I've been here for so long, I still live the culture. And I was prey to silence, shame, and stigma, which is part of the title of today's presentation. I lived it because I was very comfortable talking about HIV and AIDS, but I wasn't comfortable talking about anal cancer when it came up. And como les digo, it took me a little while to get warmed up to it. So that's fortunately where I met Jessica and we were able to talk, and that's how I ended up here. Where I am today and what we're doing is I've put it out to other people like, hey, I want to, like, if I'm going to be the poster child for anal cancer because nobody else wants to do it, pues vámonos. Like I'm 51, si lo sabe Dios, que lo sepa el mundo, no? Let's go do it. And like many of you, I heard y'all talk about starting new groups and new projects. And like you, I want the Latino people to know that there's resources and there's information and that we don't have to die. And we don't have to die in silence and secrecy, because I still know people here in the Valley, here in Orange County, that during the lockdown weren't getting their medications because they used to be delivered to their house. And because everybody was home, they had fear that the pharmacist would come to their house with a delivery. ¿Y qué son esas pastillas? We have people who didn't attend support groups and therapy because it was from home now and they didn't have any privacy to get on Zoom. And so I can only imagine how many people are. So here's the statistic: 1 in 500 people are diagnosed with anal cancer. Out of those people, 75% reach stage 4 or terminal and die. And a lot of them died not knowing that it was anal cancer until afterwards. And that's really sad. And I think about family members in Monterrey still that don't get tested, don't get diagnosed, don't go for a checkup, porque no saben, because they're afraid to ask, because religiously, and when people tell me, like, what does religion have to do with cancer? Well, here's something. As I've opened up more, I get emails. I have an HIV positive life page on Facebook, but I include anything that I've been diagnosed, I include in that page. So when I was talking about cancer, there was a gentleman that emailed me and messaged me and said, what do you think about God and cancer? And we kind of discussed it, and I asked him why. And he said that when he was diagnosed with anal cancer, his sister told him that it was his fault. Because when he was young, he let his uncle touch him. And because he was molested, God was punishing him now. And that's why he had anal cancer. And I bawled when I read that. And I thought, this poor man has been living under this shame that somehow the actions of somebody else and God watching him caused him to have anal cancer. And he believed it. And he wasn't seeking treatment. And then another lady emailed me, and I have several stories, but these are the ones that stick out the most. A lady was molested also when she was younger, and her cousin would grab her breast. And when she developed breast cancer, her mom told her it was her fault. Por andar de loca, Dios te está castigando, and that's why you have breast cancer. So, and the technical, or the way she put it is like, por eso se te van a caer, por andar de loca. And I thought, wow, like it's 2022 and we're still living under that shame. I'm not gonna lie, every once in a while I do something, I'm like, oh, Dios me está viendo, like let's watch it. So we still are prey to them. We still are, but there's a ha funny way to look at it. And then there's a crap, people are still dying because we live under this. Does that make sense? Everybody cool with me? I have about 10 more minutes to go. So what I do now, I still do comedy, but now I do a lot of the I do a lot of the conferences and summit circuits. So people will hire me to do comedy at health fairs and conferences because somehow I can make jokes about being sick. Yo todo tengo. You tell me I got it. HIV, cancer, diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure. Bien mexicano, todo tengo. And so when I go and make jokes about things, people kind of think it's funny because I have it all. On our social media platforms, we're trying to do more shows that are geared toward those specific points. Like HIV, we're about to do a show on me and three of my good friends. We all went off disability because I was on disability when I was diagnosed because I was really sick. But we're going to do a show about going off disability and being HIV positive and really taking charge of your life. I want to find other Latinos who speak Spanish and English to do an anal cancer show and talk about how culture, religion, and social norms affected us in our treatment and our diagnosis. Nobody should have to get to the point where I got. No Latino, no gay man should have to get to this point. I know that the number of getting treated has gone from 55 to 45. I tell gay men who have anal sex, if they're over the age of 30, go get checked. So on my platforms, we are trying to do more shows that are geared towards health issues and bringing in people like y'all. So this is an invitation. We bring in people from all walks of life, especially if you're working in the health systems and you want to talk about what you're working on. One of our new shows that we're planning to launch this summer is called La Comunidad, the community. And it's basically asking like, Jessica Ayala, what are you doing in your community? ¿Qué están haciendo en su comunidad? And whatever side of health you're in, whatever advocacy or activism you're in, we want to hear about it. Let's share it because you might be doing that in El Paso, but maybe somebody in New York is doing something similar and they may want to chat with you and find out how they can relate to people better. And I realize that as we get into conferences and in live conferences again, even though we were on Zoom and we were having, I mean, aquí estamos, where I'm in Laguna Beach, you folks are in El Paso, and here we are together. Even though we were so connected, we were so disconnected. Porque nomás everybody's just in the meeting, se acaba la junta, vámonos, everybody's gone. So part of our, again, putting on my Superman cape, o más bien el Chapulín Colorado, because that's more Mexican. Part of our wanting to help the community is talking about health issues more and bringing to the front. I'll be honest, I was very hesitant about talking about my cancer more or being more visual because it affects my acting career. I really wanted to be an actor hard. I still am. I just finished a short film. Yo les digo cuando salga. But I know that I don't get a lot of parts because I do a lot of you Google me and you'll see HIV, or you Google me and you'll see cancer. I know that a lot of people don't hire me because of it. I know they do. And I've heard it through the grapevine that it's like, oh, it's because you do all this advocacy and they don't want HIV associated to their project. Okay, well, I get it. Or I don't get hired to do comedy because, oh, he's that AIDS guy. And I'm like, dudes, it's 2022. Grow up, learn. But that also means you realize that we're not done yet. We haven't finished our work yet. There's still more. The other things that I'm doing is, again, because of the advancing the science, I'm working with you folks. UT San Antonio has approached me for a webinar. I'll be working on some other projects with some folks in Washington So, but I don't want to be the only one. It gets, I know it sounds very conceited, but it gets lonely when you're the only Latino that's talking about anal cancer, because I get tired. I'm my body gets tired. My brain gets tired sometimes. Um, as a spiritual coach, I'm very big about body, mind, and spirit. And sometimes my body at 7:30 in the morning, the alarm goes off, and I'm like, I just want to stay in bed. And then my mind sometimes thinks like, is today the day? I know it sounds very morbid, but because I still suffer from cancer brain, chemo brain, there are days, porque somos bien noveleros, ¿no? Aquí no le gustan las novelas, aquí no. And it always happens that in the novela, that main character, when something really great is happening, all of a sudden he's driving home to celebrate because he just got that big promotion, and he gets in a car accident and he dies. And porque soy bien novelero, every once in a while I think, I'm like, is today the day that I've done? Is today the day that I've done the greatest thing in my life? And so every opportunity that is given to me, every chance that I get to speak to folks, I take it. And my friends are like, "Ay, te encanta estar en la cámara." And I'm like, but what if today is the day? What if today I get in my car and I don't make it? I want to make sure that I have the opportunity to share my story with you guys. And but I want other folks to do that too. And then my spirit, I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic that I will be discovered and I will make a great movie. And then somebody in Mexico will be like, ven a hacer una novela. And then you'll be like, I remember that guy. He talked on one morning. And I still believe that one day I will be the great, I'll make the cover of a magazine for my advocacy work. And I want to be the next Walter Mercado because I'm really good at what I do. And si no saben quién es Walter Mercado, shame on you. Deberían de saber, como no saben. There are still things that I want to do in life, and but every once in a while, my spirit gets tired. And then my mom passed away in 2020, August 7th, 2020, and in South Texas, and I couldn't go see her because we were right in the middle of the pandemic. And one thing that my mom taught me as a kid was to be resilient and be resourceful and to not give up. And whenever I wanted to quit anything, she was like, ¿Por qué? Like, why are you quitting? And I'm like, because it's too hard. And she's like, that's why you should keep doing it, because it's hard. And so that's why I do these things, because it's hard sometimes to share your story in front of people for 45 minutes and keep their attention. But I love my life. I'm very grateful to God and the universe for all the opportunities, and I'm very blessed to do what I do. Les digo con de todo corazón, what they say about if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. It is so true, man. It is so true, because this weekend I got to MC an event in Phoenix. It was 96 degrees. It was hot, but man, I had a great time. The week before, I was acting in a little film. That night, I was doing comedy. This morning, I'm here with y'all. Wednesday night is when we do our show. So we do a show tonight on live stream. Check us out on YouTube. I'm doing everything I love. But every once in a while, I still get reminded when I take my pills, you're HIV positive. And I get reminded when I change my ostomy bag that I have an ostomy and that I had cancer. Pero la vida es buena. Life is good. And if anything you take away from my message today is that no matter how hard it gets, you can still keep going. Just keep fighting. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Jessica, do you want to lead the discussion? Welcome questions.
Yes, Dr. Moya. So if anybody has any questions, you want to put them in the chat. I do want to start with something in prior discussions, right? We talked with you, Danielle. about the work that we can do as advocates. As you know, our project focuses on HPV. We focus on the prevention and the promotion of the HPV vaccine, trying to figure out, the challenges that come when receiving access to care, how we can promote, how can we educate our community. So from your perspective as a patient, right, the other side, as advocates, what do you think we can do better to support the survivors? What can we do better to because I, like you said, sometimes we have a God complex of, we're going to educate you, we know the stuff, we know the information, but how can we better be more, I guess, empathetic? How can we better be more approachable to them? Build that rapport and trust. What is your perspective? What is your insight?
And first of all, I want to start by saying full respect to everybody. I don't know everybody, but I was listening to the conversations before I started, and like choir, I feel like, every time one of us advocates comes to you, is like, bienvenido, vamos a cantar todos juntos, because you're the ones out there, and we're but number one, the reason I didn't get into HPV so much is because all I know is that I was diagnosed with HPV. That was the extent of the information that I got. I need to learn more. I need to know more. How do we get the information? I think that number one is bringing in, no porque soy yo, please, but people like me who are already advocating for something, that already have like a platform, who are already using their voice, who now discovered that we had HPV. Like, I didn't even know, so now teach me so I can help you spread the message. Does that make sense? Like use me as your guinea pig. Like, how are you teaching? Let me be your student. Let me be your student. Let me sit down with you, teach me what I need to learn, and then let me start adding that to my story. Because for those, como les dije, like 21 years ago in South Texas, and the honest truth, the reason I really, really got into advocating, this is going to make sense in a minute. The reason I really got into advocating was because I was volunteering at the Valley AIDS Council, and I was handing all the pamphlets, and they were doing a health fair at one of the community colleges, and none of the employees wanted to go. And they were like, will you go and talk? Because you've already been talking at clinics and stuff. I said, sure. That's how I got into advocacy, by going and talking to people. Over the last 21 years, my story has been growing. It's not just that HIV, it's HIV plus mental health, because I also do mental health, cancer, ostomy, todo. So now my story is going to grow even more after this year, because now I'm going to include HPV into it. And I think one of the important things that we forget, and I learned this through HIV, is that we estamos tan like tunnel vision, and it's just about HIV. And we used to do that too. HIV, until we discovered that all of these people had cancers, and all of these people had heart attacks, and we discovered mental health. So the second diagnosis has started to be included. ¿Sí me entienden? And it's about growing. So it's sometimes I feel like sometimes we get into tunnel vision, like guerreros, like let's go fight for HPV. I'm just using you, HPV, but use us. Use us, like those of us that already have a platform somewhere. Like, let's be allies. Like, you're on the HPV aisle, I'm on the HIV cancer aisle. How can we work together to do things to grow the message? ¿Sí me entiendes? Like even the Justice League is not just Superman and Batman. Like, it's a whole bunch of superheroes. So let's all be superheroes together. Ya les dije, yo soy Chapulín Colorado. So just so you know, that's fine. That was a joke, by the way. You can be Chapulín if you want to. I saw Jorge laughing. It's like, I want to be Chapulín. Okay, Jorge, you can be Chapulín. Fine. Does that make sense? Did that answer the question? I just feel like we don't need to work alone anymore. It's not just about us. Like, we can combine efforts. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
A lot of sense, Daniel. A lot of sense. You spoke about stigma, and that's something that continues to intrigue me. And just when I think I understand what's at the root of stigma, I realize that I don't fully understand stigma. And the stigmas that you mentioned around whether it's living with cancer, living with tuberculosis, living with HPV-related experiences. So what can we do from where you sit and stand better to talk about stigma or address what's at the root of stigma, especially among the youth? My take is that we work a lot at the university with youth, and they seem to be pretty healthy for the most part, even though we know that their mental health is much more vulnerable, that we know. So I'll stop there. What can we do more, do better, or stop doing to address some of those stigmas that get in the way of us having those courageous conversations about your health and your risk for how to protect?
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate that here in Southern California, I get to do HIV education and prevention to, I do high school seniors. We teach about HIV 101 prevention, community college for those of you that are going, for those that are going to medical. We talk about medications and secondary effects and such. And then at the university level, we talk to future doctors and nurses and mental health experts about patient care. So I have a 3-tiered presentation that I do for schools. You have to meet them where they are. And y a veces se nos olvida. I mean, we were all teenagers, right? Okay, I'm going to give you this quick example because me and my partner, Christian, used to have this argument. So 2020 comes down, right? There's a big lockdown where students are about to have their graduation, their prom, whatever, and everything gets shut down and no pueden. And there's all these like, oh, my kid is mad. And my partner was saying, ay, que saben de la vida? What do they know? Like, it's not the worst thing that's going to happen that they don't go to prom. And I'm like, yes, it is, because they're only 16, 17. This is their life right now. Their major goal in life is, what dress are you going to wear to prom? But we as adults forget that. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I went to high school in Monterrey, La Prepa, and I used to go shopping in McAllen. So I was like, ooh, bougie. So my biggest thing was like, what shoes was going to buy in Texas that they couldn't get in Monterrey? That was my thing. My mom was like, preocúpate por cuando estés por el trabajo. I'm like, I'm not working right now. Like, I don't care about that. So I think that one of the things that we forget, and I'm very fortunate that I get to work with kids. I've always, obviously the last 2 years, not so much, but before COVID, we used to target about 3,000 students a year. One of the things that's helped me is to meet them with where they are. What is the most important thing to them right now? And how can we, por no decir, how can we infiltrate that place? If we're going to go talk to university students, what is the most important group at the university? What is who are the most popular kids? Is it the sports? Is it drama? Is it the LGBT group? Like, who are the influencers at the school? Let's target them. Let's get them on board. How can we use them to talk about it? If there's a drama club, hey, can you guys, here's a script. We wrote this, here's some information. Can we do a short video on HPV and students made by you guys? Because students don't want to hear about us. They don't want to hear it. The only reason I go to the schools is because one of my best friends works at UCI and she's in the student health department. She's like, you have 20 years experience, come. And aparte estoy bien loco. So sometimes I act like I'm 17 years old. So that helps a lot too. But if you're already at a school and your school does have like a drama program or a sports program, or get those popular kids to help you. Bring them on board. Get them excited about being a positive force. Use that energy for something positive. There are people that want to write a script. There's a group in Houston. They're in Houston. Plus, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's FLAS, and they do HIV AIDS awareness for Latinos. Back in 2016, I believe, they just developed a series, una novela. They did a novela on HIV. I think they're like in their 4th or 5th season right now on YouTube. But they put out novelas. They're like 8-minute episodes. But they talk about HIV and they go into the clinic and they talk about testing and disclosing. So why can't, and I thought, that's freaking genius. ¿A quién no le gusta la novela? Let me tell you, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're awake and you're flipping to channels in Marimar, I stop and watch. I've seen it 100 times, but I still want to know why she's crying. So why are we not using our culture to get to our people. We want to Americanize our system to teach Latinos, and that doesn't make sense. Does that make sense? ¿Me entienden? Like we take the pamphlets that are made for Americans, for Americanos, and then we translate them to Spanish. We don't culturalize them. We just translate them. And I say this because I'm a language justice consultant too. That's one of my jobs. Oh, that's my other job. So I translate things. So people send me their Google Translate, and then I make it more Mexican because that's what I speak. But then I have to make it more general because we work with all kinds of people. But you know what I'm talking about. So yo pienso que in order to get to young people, we need to think like young people. Second, give young people some credit and give them some responsibility. Third, what is the culture? Where do they come from? Porque por más gringo que se crea el sobrino, he'll still come home for tortillas de harina and barbacoa on Sundays. Let me tell you, like it still happens. So let's stop fighting our culture and use it for ourselves. Does that make sense? Hope I'm not sharing too much. But that's one thing that I've learned in the language, in the translating consulting thing, is all these years we were translating it. We wanted our culture to understand because we fell prey to it. Pues ya estás en Estados Unidos, aprende cómo es en Estados Unidos. And no es cierto. Ya estás en Estados Unidos. Yes, you have to learn some things, but let's also respect your culture and let's talk your language. And I think people come around. Y la gente sabe, no, la gente, you feel it in your heart. So no, I'll shut up there. I hope that made sense.
Thank you, Daniel.
So thank you, Danielle, for your presentation. That was really moving and interesting. And I don't have enough adjectives, but I work at a medical school with future physicians, and I was really moved by what you were talking about, your conversations with your providers and how they came up with every other reason that something might be wrong with you, or unwillingness to talk about certain things. And we talk about this as part of this group too, in terms of provider trust and communication. And we find that a lot of it's well known that provider recommendation for the HPV vaccine is a major player in people's decisions to take it, but the discomfort or unwillingness to talk about sexual health in general is part of the problem. And so that's my very long way of getting to my question, which is, if you were to work with my students or advise me on how to talk to them about this, where are some of the areas that you think communication could improve or is really important?
Thank you. And hi, Kristen. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Okay, so it took me a little while to get to this. I've realized by now, you've probably realized by now that I don't have short stories. Everything for me is long. I used to say long story short, but it's mentiras. Everything's long for me. So it took me a couple of years to figure out the best way to approach future doctors and nurses and mental health workers. Because I would walk into the classroom and we would start talking and nobody would ask questions. Nobody would talk. So one day I was like, how can I get their attention from the very beginning? Because as a patient, we only have so much time when we walk into the office, and I need to get you as my doctor. I need to get your attention quickly. And sometimes the way doctors work is so mechanical that I need them to stop. And I'll tell you a side story about that in a minute. But when I go into a classroom, they introduce me and they present me, and I start out by saying penis, vagina, blowjobs, anal, gay, transgender. And I'm like, if any of these words bother you, insult you, are uncomfortable, you are welcome to leave the class. And of course, I talked to the teacher before that. I'm like, you're welcome to leave the class. Because if you're getting into HIV, these words will come up. And if you're not comfortable saying them or hearing them, then HIV is not the career path for you. So you may be excused. And we have had students walk out. And I'm like, okay, now that they left, can we have an adult conversation? And now for some reason, that icebreaker just makes everybody else like, Now we can talk about stuff. And then I start telling my story. I tell my story about HIV, and I'm a lot more blunt with the future doctors. I'm like, I had sex when I was very young, and I believe that's how I was infected, and that's how I became HIV positive. So it was either anal or a blowjob or something that happened oral that caused it. And now they can start asking questions. We also do a lot of role playing. So there's a couple of professors that do role play days, and me and sometimes other friends of mine that are in the area, other colleagues, will go, and we're all HIV positive, and we'll break out into groups, and we are walking into an intake. So sometimes there's like 5, 6, if it's a big group, maybe 10, but we walk into an intake. So I walk into your office and say, Kristen, you're the student. And I'm like, what would you ask me? And most of the times there's a list of questions that most future doctors have. I don't know if you guys have like this book of powers that you use or something, but
it's a chance. It's a chance scroll.
Yeah, I know you're probably like this cult of that you're part of, but I'm like, okay, take that, but it's not the only questions you should ask. The moment that you ask me, because most forms have gay, straight, bisexual, and now we're living this world of huge diversities. I'm like, the moment I say I'm gay, your attention should change. It should be, if you answered yes, go to page 5, not keep going, because obviously if you ask me about like having straight sex, I'm like, I don't have straight sex. I don't know how that affects me. Like, it doesn't. I have a gay partner. There's a different set of rules that we play by. Yes, it's still a relationship, but the relationship is different. And this matters, for instance, in adherence, medications. It matters in getting checked. It mattered for anal cancer. I'll give you this example. Anal cancer, gay man with a partner. We've been together 2 years. The moment that I'm diagnosed with anal cancer, me as a passive in the relationship, when we have sex, obviously I'm going to use my butt. So the moment that you as a doctor tell me, hey, you have anal cancer, you can't have anal sex probably ever again. So you're telling me that my sexual connection with my partner is no longer available. What am I supposed to do? Mental, like your mental health is all right. How is my partner going to stay with me? Why is he going to stay with me? As soon as I'm done with treatment, is he going to leave me? Is he going to cheat on me? Is he going to? So as a physician, I tell them the moment that you're diagnosing me with anal cancer and I am a gay man in a young relationship, mental health should be right at the top of the list too. Are you going to therapy? Do you have a therapist? No. Let's get you into therapy. Treatments. Are you working out because your body needs to get better? No. What can we do to help you work out? Quick story. When I was going through chemo and I couldn't eat, they kept giving me all these recommendations, protein juices and drinks, and no me caían bien. I kept throwing them up. I could not hold any. My stomach could not process fake protein stuff. But one of my friends was at a restaurant and she called me and she's like, can I bring you some soup? And I said, you know what I'm really craving? Some bean and cheese tacos. And I'll be darned if that's not what opened up my appetite after chemo. That was it. But my doctor and my nutritionist never thought about that. She kept trying to get me all this other stuff. And finally I went to her and go, she saw me gaining weight. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm eating tacos. And she was like, oh, but tortillas are so bad and your cholesterol. And I'm like, girl, I'm gaining weight. Like right now, I want to get up above 130 pounds. Like, I'm not going to worry about my cholesterol until later. So there's, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference. The moment they see Latino on my form, it's a different way of thinking. Are you religious? And people think, oh, why you ask that? Because it matters. Are you religious? Do you have a support system? Like, do you pray every day? Because Latinos, we don't meditate, we pray. So are you praying? Does that bring you some serenity? Should we connect you with the group? Like, there's all these other little things that help me. I don't know if that is answering your question, but we teach the students to look beyond the form. I tell them all the time, I'm like, I'm not just a paper. I'm not a number. I'm a person. So when you read that, that's just an outline for you. It's just an outline. It's not the almighty of who I am. And as soon as you read that, and so I have a bunch of quick stories, but I'll take. There was a girl who was in one of my presentations in high school, senior, because we're only allowed to do seniors here in Orange County. So I did this. She was in my senior class. I went and taught at the community college. She was in the community college class. She found out I was coming the next year. She wasn't in the class, but she came to the class. She found out to her friend that I was coming. So she sat in the class and she brought friends. She kept bringing friends. She went to university. She ended up volunteering at the student center, who my friend is the assistant director. So she found out I was coming to present. So she was in my presentation. And I always remember because she had this big curly hair. She looked like the guy from The Simpsons. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. She took 2 more of my classes in high school. So during the lockdown, 2020, my first appointment with my doctor in 2020, I go to my doctor, and it's a teaching clinic. So the doctor says, she's going to do your checkup today. I'm like, okay, let's go. She says, you don't remember me, do you? And I'm like, we had a mask and her hair was all pulled back. And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, should I know you? And she had her last name. Her name's Gabby, but she had her last name. I never knew her last name. And she goes, you don't remember me? And I'm like, I don't. She's like, you're Mr. Danielle G Garza. She's like, I've been in your classes. I'm like, you have. So she undid her ponytail, the big hair was up. I'm like, oh my God, Gabby. So I'm like, what are you doing here? I hadn't seen her in several years. She's like, well, I took all your classes. I moved to San Francisco and I'm doing HIV research. She's like, because of you, I am doing HIV research. I'm like, wow, that's pretty. So it made me realize that the work that we're doing made an impact. But what she told me that made an impact is when I came into the room and said, penis, vagina, anal. She's like, that's when I realized that's what I want to do. Like, that's what I want to do. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you very much. We're an osteopathic school, so the mind, body, spirit thing is really important to us as well. But I do see the tendency, especially when you're learning, to just go by the checklist because that's what you're learning and that's what your anchor point is. So yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and anytime you want me, bring me out there. I will.
Yeah, I've already started that process, so you'll be hearing from me. Thank you.
Yes. See, it never hurts to ask, people. It never hurts to ask. Did we have another question? Feel free, please. And as you can see, I don't edit anything, so go for
it. Daniel, the other thing that was also very striking, and we discussed this during the call that we had after San Antonio, was your experience with tuberculosis. And it reminded me that for those of us or others working in HIV, we can never lose sight of the relationship that HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, diabetes, and other conditions have. And so I was struck that your providers hadn't really discussed with your tuberculosis as well. And it's almost one of those conditions that is like from the old age. And so it really doesn't get discussed and talked about, and especially with COVID, COVID compromises your lungs, and so does tuberculosis. So it's fascinating that even in COVID times, we don't take opportunities to discuss other risks and conditions. So again, you reminded me that we continue to lose opportunities to be much more intentional in our work in health, and that the silo mentality still sometimes get the best of public health and social work and a few other disciplines. So I don't know if you have anything else to comment or any words of wisdom on how to be mindful, because a lot of the programs that we are affiliated are very structural in terms of its funding. So we fund you to do A, but not hang around B and C. And so anything that you do B and C is like you're on your own. So I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for bringing up TB, because my grandfather had TB, and so my mom took care of him before he died, so she was exposed. So we're not sure if that's where we got exposed to it. But when I was diagnosed with AIDS, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but so I was losing my hair. I was 110 pounds when I went into the hospital. Lost a lot of muscle. I was in a wheelchair. Stomach infection, TB, bronchitis, todo. I mean, you look at a poster for somebody with AIDS, and I don't know if I shared that with Jessica. I don't think I sent you the picture, but I'll send it to you so you can see it. I should have had it ready. Yeah, I didn't know really what TB was when I was diagnosed. I just knew that it was airborne. And the only thing that I remember, like the horrible part was the nurses, because they would come to our house with the little medication, little pouches. Man, and those nurses find you when it's like they have a tracker system. I don't know if any of you will work on that, but I want to know how y'all do it. Because donde quiera que estaba, they would find me. And I'm not lying. I was eating out because I was in, I could infect anybody by it. And we were eating out and they showed up at the restaurant. No sé cómo supieron, but they showed up at the restaurant. And they're like, oh, they told us you were here. I'm like, who told you? Like, oh, you were following me. So to this day, when people talk about the chip and code, I'm like, I already have a chip. The government's been following me for 20 years. So yes, I'm on the site. But yeah, I didn't know about TB. So when I was diagnosed, rifampin, that is the only medication that I'm still allergic to. It's like a curse word, because everywhere I go, they're like, "What, are you allergic to anything?" I'm like, rifampin. I was so allergic to it that I had to go to the CDC center in San Antonio for 3 weeks. And I'll tell you the quick story again. Pa todo tengo cuentos. So they sent me because I was getting allergic reactions. My arteries and my veins would pop up from the medication. And it was like having a roadmap on my arms. So I ended up going for 3 weeks. And I think I told you the story, right? When we first, so when they told me I was going, they were like, "You're going to go for a week. Like, más para que ver cómo estás." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." Then they get you in this van to transport you. And it basically looks like a dog pound van, because there's a glass and it's cold and you sit in the back. There's not even a seat belt. You just sit in the back and they just transfer you. And they took me from the valley to San Antonio. But when I got there, they were like, "Oh, so you're going to be with us for a month?" And I was like, "A month? Wait a minute, I thought you said a week." And then the nurse comes in my room later. She's like, "Oh, so you're going to be with us for 3 months?" I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute." Then the doctor came in on Monday because I got there on a Friday. The doctor's like, "So you're going to be with us for 6 months?" I'm like, "Can't say, like, what happened?" So the bet that I made with my doctor is that if I gained 15 pounds, I could go home. I gained 50 pounds in 3 weeks. And I was like, I'm out of here. But I learned a lot about how little information we had, because they didn't tell me. This is 2000, before the internet. They didn't tell me what TB was. They didn't tell me, just like HPV. Like, I don't know where it came from. I don't know how I got it. I don't know if it was from my mom and my grandfather. All I know is that I had it and I had to go to medication. So I was in isolation for a week before I was let out with the other patients there at the CDC center. So también, when people talk about isolation during COVID, I'm in isolation in my apartment. No, you're not. You don't know what isolation is. You don't know what it is until you're locked up in this room. They bring your food in complete hazmats and they don't talk to you. All they do is they come in with a little chart, take your blood, and walk out. Nobody said a word to me for 3 days. Nobody said a word to me. And that doesn't mess with your head. And I still have that trauma. I know I'm getting off track here, but even during the lockdown here alone in my house, there was a fear that I would die and I would be alone, because that's what happens to people in those centers. You are locked up and you're alone, and they check on you 3 times a day. When they bring you your food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that's the time when they come and collect your urine or your blood, and they leave and they don't say a word to you. I don't know if it's changed now or not, but man, that is a horrible way to live. And I knew people who did that for weeks. And so I would love to talk more about TB. I would love to learn more so I can share more. No sé. And I'll be honest, I don't know that much. But it does affect people with HIV because your immune system is so messed up. If you get to the AIDS part, I mean, if you get down to the AIDS level, it's harsh. People with HIV, and I'll say this about HIV community, man, we do kick butt. We do a lot of work. There's a lot of community. There's a lot of money in HIV. There's a lot of conferences. We do a lot of talking. We still have a lot more work to do because people are still getting infected. I just got a message from somebody who got infected a month ago, and they're in their 30s, and they're Latino. which pisses me off. I'm like, damn, we're still missing the mark somehow. So I guess what I can say about TB is teach me what I need to know so that I can spread the message to warn people. Because when y'all were the ones, I've been, what y'all told me about the numbers rising and the borders, I've been sharing that with people. I've been telling people when I do presentations now, or as I talk to people, I'm like, did y'all know TB is on the rise? And some people were like, I thought that was eradicated. I'm like, no, like it's still. So lo que me enseñaron the last time we talked, I talk about that now. So it does work. I mean, I don't know if I'm the best example because I repeat everything I hear. But I'll find you more people like me if you need them. I know a bunch of people who are eager to do more work. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question somehow? I always feel like I answer my questions in big long stories. Parezco viejito. Déjame contarte. And then they wander off in the story.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. And we would be very much interested in sharing the little bit we know about tuberculosis and lung health. And yes, we can certainly do that, as one offering to keep.
I think what some people don't understand about, like, for instance, my nucleus, my center is HIV, because that's where my advocacy work started. I'll always be HIV community, but it's a spider web. We have a spider web of, because HIV was the beginning, and then TB, mental health, breathing problems, and then cancer, diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure, you name it, it's there. Like stoma, neuropathy. Como les digo, on May 9th, I'm speaking on mental health here at UCI. But it all starts from HIV. And again, you're the choir. I feel like I'm coming in to just teach you a song that you already know. But let's not have tunnel vision. It's 2022. We're coming out of a pandemic. We should have regrouped, and some of us did. We should have regrouped during the lockdown. We should have taken the time to find out, like, what's my neighbor doing? What are you doing? And I say this because I did it. I took every webinar, every class, because I was home now. For those of you who don't know, here in Los Angeles and Orange County, you can spend between 20 and 35 hours in traffic. That's because I did it. So when I took those 25 hours a week and I was home, it gave me time to, like, take classes and do webinars and get certified. And I was like, I'm going to do more than HIV now. And I learned a lot. And so my only suggestion is put down the telescope, because it's not just one thing. We're missing out so much information. And los hermanos y las hermanas que tenemos, I can only talk for myself. I feel like I fail them sometimes. Like I'm not doing my part. I feel like I need to do more. And that's why I'm here. I guess maybe makes sense?
Yes, makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Danielle, once again for this wonderful testimonial you gave us. If you want to put your information, Danielle, on the chat, as well, I can share if any of you guys are interested in connecting with Danielle or knowing more about him. Just you can also message me, and I'll be the middle person to connect. So we want to thank you all for connecting. Like I said, this is a recording, so I'll be sending to all of you guys if you want to share with other peers or colleagues that would like to hear the testimony of Danielle. And we're gonna meet again in about 3 other months. Until then, I think the best message I can leave you guys is what Danielle said, and it's not to have a tunnel vision, and keep connecting, keep speaking, and keep flourishing in our community. And that's about it for all of us. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you soon.
Hi, thank you so much. It was nice seeing you again.
Thank you.
Gracias a todos. Nos vemos pronto por ahí.
Gracias, Danielle.